Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Here for Good, where we explore how transformational leaders create a positive impact on the world around them. Throughout history, inspirational leaders and organizations have always used the power of words to connect with emotion, galvanize communities, and enlist others in causes for change and good. At Virtua Health, we are changing the way people think and talk about health and well-being. So it is our privilege to tee up meaningful conversations with engaging social catalysts and thought leaders. Please welcome our host, Dennis Pullin, President and CEO of Virtua Health, as he sparks today's exciting conversation.
Currently in his first term, Congressman Andy Kim was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 2018. He represents the 3rd Congressional District in New Jersey. Congressman Kim's professional life has been one of service. He has worked under both Democrats and Republicans and served at the Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House National Security Council. In Afghanistan, he served as a civilian strategic advisor, and in April, was appointed to the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis. Congressman Kim's connection to South Jersey started long before his professional career. The congressman went on to earn a degree in political science from the University of Chicago and later received a Rhodes Scholarship and a Harry S. Truman Scholarship to study international relations at Oxford. Congressman Kim, welcome to Here for Good.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm feeling a little nervous. You're the 3rd Rhodes Scholar that I've had on this podcast, and I think I'm bringing the collective IQ down a little bit. So I'm going to have to up my academic game here just to stay in the same group. So I'm really happy to have you as part of this podcast.
No, this is going to be great. I've been a big fan and looking forward to be on the podcast.
You know, you and I have talked about many times about the importance of healthcare as something that inspired you to run for office. I know that both your mother and your father were healthcare professionals. Can you tell me a little bit about how they and the work they did helped to shape your views?
Absolutely. You know, my mother and my father grew up in South Korea. I'm the son of Korean immigrants. And my dad actually grew up in an orphanage. He grew up as with polio, suffering from polio since he was a baby. And, you know, when I hear him talk about the struggles and the challenges that he went through, somehow overcame that, got in himself an education, came to the United States to study. My dad, who grew up in an orphanage as a polio survivor, ended up getting a PhD in genetics here in America. And to your point, you know, served his life trying to cure cancer and Alzheimer's. And what he particularly did that I thought was just so lasting an impression on me is that he would go out and meet with families that were afflicted by cancer or Alzheimer's in their family and really try to remember and recognize the human struggle in what it is that he's trying to do. He's someone that recognized that great scientists and medical professionals nearly rid the world of the disease that plagued him his whole life, of polio. And he wanted to pass that forward and try to help make a difference with others. My mother, a nurse serving the hospital systems of South Jersey her whole career, both of them understood that it was more than just a job. And that's what they taught me. They taught me that service isn't just a job, it's a way of life. And that impact is what it is that we try to achieve. And that's how we measure the value of our lives and the value of our work. So those intrinsic lessons are what they taught me that I've tried to set as a foundation of my own career and my own work.
You know, and that's interesting. It is clearly your parents had a huge impact on your career. And I think what you may have been alluding to is the other area in which they've had an impact is sort of that to serve, or your duty to serve, as a mindset, and how service isn't just a job, it's sort of a way of life. Now, I know you have two very young boys. How do you and your wife now start to teach them about a life of service and what it means as they grow up, as your parents did with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I have, as you said, I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, two boys that are just huge troublemakers. And just, I have the dents in the drywall to prove it as they throw their Hot Wheels around. But what I am trying to instill in them is not that they're not going to be able to understand necessarily the term service and what is embodied within that. But what I am trying to instill upon them is what I consider to be an underlying foundational element of service, which is empathy. Is that I truly believe that empathy is so critically important to the work that we do, especially those of us in positions where we are trying to serve the public. I need to, in my job, understand what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes, to see the world through their eyes, whether it's their struggles with coronavirus, whether they are a military family and they are at the joint base, different elements of that. And that's something that my parents were able to instill in me. I'm trying to think through what was it that built that fire in me and really strengthened my ability to try to connect on a personal level with people. And this wasn't just about my work in Congress. This helped me in my work as a diplomat. It helps me just in my day-to-day life with my family and my friends and my neighbors. So that's what I hope I can instill in my kids, is just to make sure that they can really try to understand the perspectives and respect the perspectives of others.
Now, I know you were, as you mentioned, you were raised in South Jersey, and before your studies and your initial career took you across the globe, including, your work in the White House and serving in Afghanistan. Tell me about your experiences growing up in the area and how it sort of, as you mentioned, shaped your approach to serving as a congressman. Were there experiences that really sort of helped you to mold how you wanted to be as a congressman?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel really blessed that I get to represent the district where I went to kindergarten. And it's a special experience just, being able to do that. But, for me, what this area taught me, the public school education, I did my whole kindergarten through 12 in the public school systems of this area. And what that taught me was not just the knowledge that I needed to be able to continue to push, but one thing I'll say is that it taught me to do the work that I do with a lot of humility. Whether that was something I learned through sports leagues that I did when I played soccer and tennis and other sports, or I was a musician as well. I got to dust it off. I got to dust off the guitar and the cello and practice a little more. But this community gave me so many opportunities to try different things out, to try to push myself and take that self initiative upon myself. And it pushed me to learn that I'm not just doing knowledge for knowledge's sake. I'm not just working for work's sake, but it's still in me that drive that I needed to find. So while doing that, still with that humility in mind.
Right. And so as a career public servant, you also had the distinction to serve under both Republican and Democratic administrations. Given the type of cross-party work, how do you view your role as a congressman? I would think that that's sort of a challenge working from a cross-party perspective.
For me, I try to think about this job in Congress as the same type of job that I had when I was at the State Department or the Pentagon or elsewhere. It's public service. It's serving the American people. You're right. Before I served as a career public servant, I served. I started my career very young in the Bush administration, worked through the Obama administration, but always as a career public servant, not as a political appointee. And I was proud of that. I worked alongside people for years at the State Department, where I still don't know if they're Democrats or Republicans. And when I served out in Afghanistan as a civilian advisor in Kabul on a military base, no one there asks you if you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Party affiliation wasn't that important at that point.
Not at all. No, you're all in the same boat. And I think those were such formative experiences for me to serve the country but apart from the partisanship. And I actually very much believe that the last place that partisan politics belongs is in national security, in these types of work. And I've come to expand that. I really think the same way. I don't think that partisan politics has a place in our healthcare, in our economy. There's so many aspects where people's lives are on the line. And you don't want people to be guided by, which party, you don't want people to be determining if they're going to support a bill based off of what the party affiliation of the author is. It should be on the merits of the bill. I know that sounds idealistic now at a time when we have divided government. But the reason I am so strong on pushing this is because, A, I don't think our country can handle much more of this just partisan, hyperpartisanship, and this pendulum swing partisanship. And two, I have seen a government that can serve without partisanship being the primary driver. As I said, I worked alongside people for years where we were not guided by that partisanship. So it's possible.
And that really brings me to an interesting point. So I know that accessible, affordable health care has been a priority of yours for some time. Now, with COVID-19 having permeated every aspect of our daily lives, and will do so, I think, for the foreseeable future, what is your experience telling you about healthcare changes we need to make as a nation?
Well, it underscores the urgency of the situation, just with so many people are so fearful of coronavirus, of so many other challenges that we're facing. It underscores the urgency and the importance that we try to do everything we can to fix our healthcare system, make sure that people can get the care that they need. And also it's about the effort that we have to put in to be strategic going forward, to plan for these types of issues. We were just underprepared as a nation for this pandemic. And there's a lot that we need to put in place to make sure that, first of all, this doesn't happen again in terms of the level of issues. And you and I, we had a lot of tough conversations in the early part of this pandemic when it came to personal protective equipment and the lack thereof, and having to have people that work at your hospitals that don't have everything that they need to be successful because of these shortages. Those are the things we absolutely need to fix going forward.
You're right. You had many conversations with me, and I know you spoke with other healthcare leaders in the areas. Have the concerns changed at all from early on? And now, as a result of the way our state, our nation responded and the impact that you've had to really reevaluate, or have you had to reevaluate changes in your priorities when it comes to healthcare issues now as a result of, as you just mentioned, many of the things that we've gone through? Have your thoughts or priorities changed as a result of that?
I think it has changed over the course of the last couple months, in part due to the circumstances. When you and I and others were first engaging on this crisis, New Jersey was at the very center of this epidemic, this pandemic in the entire world. And just the fear, we didn't know too much about this virus still at that time. And there was a lot of just deep concerns, and we had just huge shortages. You remember how little testing capability we had back then, and the personal protective equipment, the shortages of N95 masks and others. It was such a dire circumstance where all of us were just trying to pull together and figure out how can we just scrounge around and find some additional PPE and get it to you and to others. So there was that situation, while those issues of testing and PPE and others are not fully resolved, we are in a better circumstance than we were back then. So it does allow us to think through what happens next. As I just saw, the I think the transmission rate in New Jersey now has ticked up above 1 over the course of the last couple of days. So we need to be careful about a possible second wave. And that's a big part of what I've been focusing on with my work on the select committee, as well as now I know a lot of people, their minds are thinking about what comes next when it comes to the vaccine development. And I'm worried about that too. So those are some elements that I've been able to move to focus on as well. Now that we don't have the level of community transmission that we did back in March and April.
So you mentioned the select subcommittee. So in April, you were appointed to this committee on the coronavirus crisis, created to provide congressional oversight of the president's administration's response to the pandemic here in the United States. Can you tell me a little more about your role on that particular committee?
Absolutely. I'm honored to be able to serve on this committee. I'm one of only 12 members of Congress in the country to serve on this committee that has oversight over the crisis response in our country. A lot of what I've been trying to focus in on is what can we do to leverage the totality of our tools at our disposal in the government to try to help us turn the corner on this virus, this pandemic. So working and pressing with our public health professionals to strengthen and improve the testing and contact tracing and isolation elements of our strategy to try to make sure that we are putting into place the strategic thinking to plan for a second wave of this virus. So those are some kind of concrete areas. So for instance, a lot that we've been pushing forward on with the second wave planning, to be able to shore up our PPE stockpiles, to increase our data collection and sharing capabilities with regards to testing, as well as trying to come up with new types of testing, like some of the antigen testing and point of care testing that we've seen now starting to proliferate in our country. Those are some of the forward-looking things. It was the goal of the committee was always forward-looking, trying to think about what are the challenges that we are facing. And as I said, with the vaccine development, doing the oversight to ensure that there is transparency to the data, that we know where the money is being spent when it comes to Operation Warp Speed, and that we can do everything we need to assure the American people that a decision by the FDA to do an emergency use authorization will be based on medical and scientific decisions, not political decisions. Yeah. So those are the types of oversight that we're trying to put into place with this select.
And that brings me to another question you just mentioned. So being in the position you are as a congressman, but you're also a father and a member of the community. So how do you balance sensitive issues like COVID-19 that at the root are not political, but in today's environment have become so?
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. I mean, it feels like every aspect of our lives in some ways could be made political, and I think that that's unfortunate. I really do believe that when it comes to this coronavirus crisis, for instance, as I said before, the last place that partisan politics belongs is in national security. Coronavirus crisis is about national security. It's about saving lives. And this is absolutely a place where we should not be engaging in that, whether it's about school openings and whether my kids or other people's kids go to school. These should not be political decisions or seen in that partisan lens. Look, I'm not going to say that I can erase all that partisanship from our discourse. But what I can say is the way I conduct myself, the way I engage with these issues, the ways that I prioritize talking and engaging with medical experts and scientists and others to be able to shape the issues that I'm focused on and how I work on it. And, when I do town halls or other issues, I just did a town hall yesterday. I always say, whether people voted for me or not, that doesn't matter. They're my bosses. I serve the people. And I hope that they genuinely understand that that's something that I care about. I know that some can be skeptical of
Sure.
me saying that there's so many talking points in politics. But my job is to just try to prove to them through my actions that I mean what I say and that I really do believe in public service apart from partisanship.
So we've talked today a lot about healthcare, but I know you have a number of other priorities you've focused on during your time in Congress, among them education, energy and environment, and the economy. Before we wrap up today, can you talk a little about some of the other priorities that you're focused on?
Happy to. Well, as I said, I just did a telephone town hall yesterday focused on the joint base in my district. We have an incredible joint base, McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, a lot of military families. This base is the largest employer in our district. And it's also about national security, which is something that I've dedicated my whole career to. So that's been a big part of my work. I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and that's been a place where I can look out for this base. The other major part of what I've been working on is again, through the other committees. So I'm on 3 committees. And the last committee is the Small Business Committee. And this has been something that is all the more important now with the coronavirus crisis. Small businesses already had so much trouble even before this pandemic. Yeah. And now it's gotten to the point where small businesses, it's a way of life that is at stake in America right now about whether or not these businesses will continue to survive, let alone thrive. And so this is something that I've poured my heart into, that I'm trying to work on every day. I'm going out every single day, visiting with small businesses throughout the district, listening to them, understanding what the challenges are that they're going through. Because again, I don't want to assume that I know everything. I don't want to have that arrogance to think that I know all the answers to the problems that people are facing. I need to listen to them, hear from them, and that allows me to go and hone the solutions that we need to help them out. So those are some of the key issues that I've been focused on over the course of my first term in Congress. And as you mentioned, a breadth of other issues that we need to continue to confront, and always trying to find ways to be able to do that as successfully as I can.
So before we close our conversation for today, I have this one question that I'd like to present all of my guests with. What would your 18-year-old self think about who you are today? So what would little Andy think about Congressman Kim?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great question. You know what? I never thought that I would run for Congress or be in politics, government. When I was 18, I definitely didn't think that I would do the foreign policy, and all this stuff was so far from my mind. I think when I was 18, I was still wishful thinking that I would become an astronaut or something like that.
Or a rock star with your guitar, huh?
I held on to that dream pretty long. I hope that my 18-year-old self would be proud of the work that I'm doing. I know that at that time, it was that would have been just before September 11th happened. That was really what changed a lot of the course of my life and pushed me to a life of service in government. But I would venture to guess that this would be very far from it. I think my 18-year-old self would probably think I'm pranking myself if I said that I'm a congressman at the age of 38. But I think I'd be proud of it. I'm the only Korean American in Congress. I'm a son of immigrants representing my home district where I went to kindergarten. I always loved this community so much, whether it's the diners I would study at when I was a teenager, or the driving into Philly after high school and grabbing a cup of coffee with friends. It's fun again to just be able to represent this community now.
Yeah. Well, Congressman Kim, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and to share thoughts with you. And I look forward to hearing more from you in the future. So thank you so much for joining us on Here for Good.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been a great honor, and it's fun to be able to talk about some of the issues that are not so much on just the day-to-day that we often have to engage with. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Take care.
It is my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Here for Good. If you liked what you heard, please leave us feedback and share our podcast link with others. Until next time, be well, everyone.